been so long that even my mama thinks that my mind is gone. But I ain't never crossed a man that didn't deserve it. Me be treated like a punk, you know that's unheard of. You better watch how you're talking and where you're walking, or you and your homies might be lying to chalk. I really hate the trip, but I gotta low. As they croak, I see myself in the pistol smoke. Fool, I'm the kind of G the little homies wanna be like, on my knees in the night, saying prayers in the street light.
Been spending most of their lives living in a gangster's paradise. We've been spending most of their lives living in a gangster's paradise. We keep spending most of our lives living in a gangster's paradise.
Okay. And we are live. That's enough again of the intro, but I'm very proud of this reel because it shows judicial corruption in New York, something that I have been dealing with for over 3 years. I'm joined here by T. Matthew Phillips, the wonderful co-host all the way from Las Vegas, Nevada, an attorney licensed in California.
Hello.
Thank you. Rare breed of very rare of those who actually understand the issue of family court on a personal level as well. And we have a brand new guest all the way from Canada, Trevor. Thanks so much for joining. It's very important that we connect, fathers, mothers, parents, victims of this judicial abuse from all over the world. And last week we have an episode with a father from Netherlands, from Europe, who explained his point of view. And you and I connected on Facebook. Actually, I know that you are more active maybe on Twitter. But I see your work on Facebook as well. And the fact that you are a Canadian activist who is experienced in that as a father who knows what family court is very important. So without further ado, please maybe introduce yourself, tell us your story briefly, and then we'll take it from there.
Oh, sure, Roman. Thanks for having me on the show there. I've listened to your Facebook posts a bunch, and it's great to see your posts on Facebook there. Yeah, I am more active on Twitter. I find Twitter kind of a political area, and that's kind of my direction. My story is I had a divorce back in 2005, 2006, which went completely south because the lawyers could see that they were going to lose the case that was being presented, and they were going to not be able to collect their fees. So they rigged the case in order to collect their fees. I actually had a court order on a lawyer to provide monthly trust account statements. And he could see that he wasn't going to be able to collect unless he kind of funneled that fees into his trust account. So he did that and didn't comply with the court order. The BC Law Society protected him not complying with a court order. I had my lawyer attempt to get him to comply, but they both kind of manipulated and didn't show up to the court and said that they had, and kind of escaped through the system that way. The judge, when I presented this evidence to trial, he'd actually created a fraudulent court order as well. And I attempted to get my lawyer to deal with it, and he didn't and refused to. So I got the transcript from the original hearing, and I presented it to the judge and showed the court order, and they were different. And then the judge made the unprecedented decision to call the plaintiff up to the stand and asked her what she had heard the judge say 7 months before, and preferred that to my evidence, the transcript. And so I didn't think that was quite fair and impartial. So I made a complaint to Judicial Council, and they came back to me and said that judges have the discretion to do that, which I disagreed with, and I think everybody in the whole world would disagree with it. They stood their ground and said yes. And so I made a complaint about the conduct of the judge that said that. And then they started getting haywire, and they started stopping to follow their procedures and all sorts of stuff like that. That kind of ended the matter for a long time. I met another lady, and I wanted to have 2 kids. I was pretty much devastated after that. I probably had 5 years of PTSD, and never saw the child again, never saw the mother again. It was a complete schmozzle. The judge who'd actually sat on that trial had been his fitness as a judge had previously been debated in Parliament, and everybody wanted him gone, except the Minister of Justice pleaded for the system to not dismiss him and let the system resolve itself. And then he really screwed up. 6 months after my complaint, he does retire, but not before the Judicial Council approved of the conduct. So now, fast forward a bunch of years, now I've got my kids. I'm still devastated. I'm still financially bankrupt from the situation. I'm basically living off support from other people, and like a lot of fathers end up doing. And then we split up, my mom and I, the mom of the kids and I. And so then the mom who'd seen all this devastation go on before tries to do the same thing to extort money from my parents. And meanwhile, I'd been taking this case to the court and saying, I don't think you can comply with your constitutional requirement to provide fundamental justice and fair and impartial trials, given the evidence that I have against you. And ultimately, they said, your evidence is irrelevant. And then they said it's conspiracy theory when I appealed it, and it doesn't reflect reality. Basically just trying to cover their ass. Knowing that they were going to do that, I initiated a complaint against the Attorney General and the Minister of Justice. We have a constitution in Canada. We have two kind of constitutions. We have the Charter of Rights, which is attached to kind of the regular constitution. And it's got a very interesting procedure. It has an enforcement procedure to the Constitution. And so I served that on the Minister of Justice, and he just ignored it. So I knew that he didn't want to respond because he couldn't. There was no legitimate response that he could have. So he just ignored it. And now I've got the situation where I asked for a writ of mandamus on the Minister of Justice to comply with his duty, which I'm probably sure it's similar to in the States. He has a duty to protect the public and see that the administration is in compliance with the law, which it wasn't, because he wasn't responding to the Constitution. And then actually about 2 months ago, I learned, kind of when I was just looking at the dates of my case, that on the day that the judge was going to make a decision on this writ of mandamus, a request for the Minister of Justice to comply with his duty, we had the trucker convoy protesting in Ottawa, and the executive declared a state of emergency. They declared martial law whilst they were in conflict with the Constitution, and whilst there was a writ of mandamus pending on the Minister of Justice to do his duty. And that was February 14th, 2022, yesterday, 2 years ago. He declared martial law on Canadians, knowing that he was in breach of his Constitution, and with calls for accountability. And that's kind of where my story is sitting right now.
Makes sense. Matthew, you have any questions? Because I have a lot prepared.
I mean, I have so many questions. I want to hear about I'm always interested in the custodial issues, you know?
Sure.
If there are any custody related issues.
Yeah, you know, I had a separation agreement with the mom, and we were week on, week off, and everything was pretty smooth. And then we had a separation agreement that kind of laid out the debts and the assets and all that kind of stuff, and it was all pretty clear. But then she attempts to bypass the separation agreement by taking to court things that weren't mediated upon, mostly the custody of the children and the child support. And she didn't mediate on those, but took them to court based on, and then I'd written to her lawyer and informed her lawyer and her of all the problems that they were going to face coming into this. And the lawyer gave the advice to my ex that it's unlikely that this guy is going to attend court given his experience in the past. And so they went to court and got primary care during a certain part of the winter, and then had reasonable and generous access to the kids. And so everything was sort of smooth for a while, except that winter. Then she exercised her discretion to seize the kids and prevent access. That was when the kids were like 7 and 4. So I didn't see them for that winter, basically. That was pretty devastating. But then got back. I didn't respond to the court, but the kids came back in the spring, and we went back to week on, week off, and everything was pretty smooth for a long time. But she changed my child support obligations from the agreed upon $200 to $2,600. She wanted it to be $4,600, but the judge went to $2,600 per month, which was unsustainable. And it was also, they also put a fee to get back into the system. I had to pay $2,500, which I didn't have. Plus I had this problem with the administration of justice. And so it kind of got stuck there. So the fees just kept going up and up and up. And I ended up going to jail for 3 months for non-payment of child support. And that was in September last year. And then when I got out, the mom stopped access. That was in November. Well, she took them to the south of France for 2 weeks, and then stopped access. The mom earns, she's in a government job. She earns close to $100,000, and my business is completely collapsed, and I earn nothing, and basically living off assistance from other people. And I only really admitted to the child support at $200 because the court had said that based on regular income in the area, he should be earning about $45,000 or something like that. So I just kind of went with that. So now I haven't seen my youngest for 6 months, and my 15-year-old, he's kind of aware of the situation. He's watched all the Simpsons, and he's pretty socially aware of the abuse that men go under. And so he comes over every day for lunch. I live a block or 2 blocks away from the school, so he comes over for lunch, and we have a nice time. But the mom's still not letting him sleep over. That's the custody deal.
Wow. And I'm curious, in Canada, is parenting, well, let me maybe preface it a little bit differently. In America, parenting is a constitutional right. Although, as I say it, I'm really disheartened that so many judges never acknowledge that. The judges fail to acknowledge that parenting is a fundamental constitutional right. And so many lawyers are, I think, frankly, afraid to argue the Constitution. But nevertheless, it is, at least in theory, a constitutional right. Do you know about Canada? Is parenting or the right to raise children, is that considered a fundamental
I
right?
don't believe it. Yeah, I don't believe it's a formal constitutional right. I haven't really investigated that so much, but there is basically a presumption of 50-50 shared parenting in Canada. So I think basically, unless there's problems, that is sort of automatic, and then they work from there. I don't believe it's constitutionally enshrined, but it's part of the Family Law Act and those kind of legislation.
So do you have, so what is your current custody status? Do you currently have any custodial rights or no custodial rights, or what is your current legal status of your children?
Well, I believe that I have 50-50 shared custodial parenting. And then there's just this primary care thing, which appears to be kind of a nebulous thing. I don't really understand. I've got my legal advice is that primary care has nothing to do with custody, but at the same time on the court order, it says that it's primary care with reasonable and generous arrangements for custodies or for access. And I've asked for week on, week off access, and I'm being denied. But I also don't have any ability to assert myself in court. because they're saying that everything I say doesn't reflect reality. So I don't really have any ability to do anything, and they ignore everything I say. I've taken the matter. Actually, I took the matter all the way to the Supreme Court of Canada here and filed habeas corpus when they put me into jail, because they're providing arbitrary justice. If you don't accept the transcript as the best evidence that you can provide, then you're saying that the judge is just making things up arbitrarily or partially.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's just that's, you know,
Just
I'm
a
sorry,
quick
go ahead.
question, my favorite topic. Is there a jury trial in custody cases in Canada, in any of the provinces? Anything that you can point to?
You know, they do, they do a pre-trial, whatever you call it, just a discussion kind of stuff.
But no, I mean jury, like 6 peers, people who are not on government payroll, 12.
No,
prior
I
to being
don't believe there's
paid.
any right to a jury. No, there's no right to a jury in the family law system.
And it doesn't matter where you are. You are in British Columbia, right? That's what you said?
Yeah, I think it's right across Canada. I don't believe there's a jury available for family law. Most of the lawyers will say, "Oh, even the Constitution, the Charter doesn't apply to family law," is what they'll say. That procedures, the procedures, the safety of the Charter doesn't apply. It's like, what are you talking about? Of course, the governing Constitution applies to the judiciary, but they don't want to admit that. But that's the reality.
Yeah.
So
it's
what
the same.
kind of
Sorry, Matthew. Go ahead. Sorry.
go ahead. No, please, I'm sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
No, what I was saying is that we do have it on the books. It's the only right that is mentioned twice in the Constitution, the 6th and 7th Amendment. Every dispute that's not criminal above $20 in value was supposed to be heard by a jury of one's peers, not people on the government payroll. And of course, it's not enforced. They deny, they gaslight the population. They've been doing that for decades. So what you are describing seems like, frankly, a cookie cutter approach that we see in America and actually across the world. So it's a custody dispute, right? It goes into trial. Judges do whatever they want. They have full discretion, which opens, of course, the gates for abuse. You cannot prove anything, and then you enter a spiral, right? You're behind on child support. Debtor's prison was supposed to be abolished in Canada in the whole civilized world decades ago, and then you still can end up in jail for not paying, while you are forced to fight for your own children for decades, right? For years, for sure. So it seems like template approach everywhere. And you mentioned in our offline conversation that you also been an active figure in this fight on that side of the border. You speak to parents from other countries. Would you agree that that's pretty much the same approach everywhere?
Yeah, I believe so. The whole system of justice we all got basically from England, and it really hasn't changed, or from Rome. And it really, how much has it changed in the 2,000 years? I would argue that it really hasn't changed a lot in the last 10,000 years since the Hammurabi, really. But you guys have the jury. We do not have a constitutional right to a jury. And interestingly enough, I've been doing a bunch of research on the jury system because I believe that it might be a good way to move forward into reform, because the jury is the peers. And my understanding is that I feel like that juries should, or a jury kind of concept should judge judicial conduct. It should judge lawyers' conduct. It should judge police conduct, and it should judge like parliamentary conduct. If we have a jury of citizens checking the executive, the judiciary, and the legislature, then perhaps we would have a better system of democracy where you have accountability to the people instead of just a claim that we are protecting the public and no oversight whatsoever.
I'm also
Because
wondering, when you, well, go ahead.
No, Matthew,
yeah, no, I
your
mean,
turn.
yeah, go for it, Matthew.
Well, I was going to say when you make arguments to the court, to try to retrieve custody and to get your children back, what do they say to you? What is their comeback, and why is it that they think that you shouldn't be around your children?
Well, so my position with the Minister of Justice, as I put to him, is that I would not submit myself to entering into a court voluntarily. Given the abuse that I've suffered, the evidence that I have that the system is not in compliance with the Constitution, I would not submit myself. So I have submitted myself where they threatened me with jail. And I did that by protesting through the Income Tax Act. And then they took me to court, and I presented all my arguments through a protest on the Income Tax Act, a failure to comply with the reporting requirements. And so I went through the court system, protesting an abuse of the rule of law and constitutionality of the court system. The lower court said basically, oh, I don't have the authority, I'm too small a court. The next court up said, all your evidence is irrelevant. And the Court of Appeal said, your evidence is all a conspiracy theory and has no basis on reality. So then they wanted me in the enforcement courts, then they wanted to put me to jail. Then they kind of, well, go to court, go to the family law court. I presented evidence of attempts to enter my stuff into the family court, and presented evidence of failure of them to accept my documents. I've also got the court registry refusing to comply with a court order to provide court audio on stuff that I have transcripts for, that the transcripts have been altered. I've had these court orders on them for a year, and they're refusing to respond to them because it demonstrates that the transcripts have been altered after a complaint to the Judicial Council. So I know that judicial corruption is absolutely a problem, and I've got the best evidence to demonstrate that fact. And I know that it's happening all around the world. I've talked to this problem in California, and I'm sure the problem is existing all across America. And you've got basically people exploiting the family unit. We don't have wars. We're not sending men off to die to fight for things for the country, and instead we've got lawyers sending men to spend all their money fighting for their kids. You're dividing up the most basic building block of society, and you're holding the kids as hostage. And that is what I hear from stories from people that have entered in the system. They've spent $100,000 or something like that trying to secure custody of the kids, and they can't get, no one will enforce the court orders anyhow. So it's kind of a meaningless prize. You spend a bunch of money getting a court order, and then no one's interested in enforcing it. So then you're back to square one, and that seems to be a common story. But I've talked to people from India, from England, New Zealand, Australia, India. I've heard stories about judges saying, well, if you can't do this, then you should sit on the street and beg to get your child support, and stories like that. And that's just what the system is doing. And I know there's some problems with historically the problems, but I kind of see now that we've got a problem with the system being exploited, basically to assert power and dominance, and mostly from women on men. I definitely have heard stories of it happening to women, but I think the statistics are about 20% of men initiate divorces and about 80% women. So if you think that a percentage of those are doing it in abusive ways, what percentage that is, maybe it's 10 or 20, maybe it's 30 or 40. It's hard to tell, but there's no accountability, so we really don't. We can only base it on kind of people talking about it. And people tend not to want to talk about it, and definitely nobody wants to hear a man talking about it. So that's kind of shuts men up pretty much. They just sort of suffer in silence or commit suicide, and that's the end of the matter. It's
Yeah,
kind of sad.
that I have to insert a qualifying statement here, because I personally see, and I didn't expect that to develop this way. More than 50% of my audience that I'm blessed with is actually women, and we do see the pendulum swinging the other way. I personally know, when I entered this fight, I personally did not expect it, but I do know women who are alienated, who were taken, whose children were taken, same illegal orders, and this whole unlawful, unconstitutional practice in every court. And although I do agree with you that statistics clearly point to the fact that men are the primary support obligors, right? And men are made forcefully through the courts to be the ATMs, if they're lucky, to see the children. But the fundamental of the system is dividing and conquering. So nothing changed, as you alluded to. For thousands of years, that's how the ruling class controlled the population, by dividing and conquering, right? So, and what's the most fundamental divider? Is the sex. And now they move to more sinister ways, right? And maybe they've been doing, most likely they've been doing that all the time. We just didn't see it. Now it's surfacing thanks to the internet and social media. We're uncovering a lot of secrets. But the most egregious, the most insidious dividing line is between parents and children, right? So they pit children against their parents, and that's the horrendous thing. But other than that, we can see that race, color, skin, you name it, education, and they're very inventive. The ruling class, right? They introduce now based on injection status, or your belief in certain system. So there's no shortage of and moreover, I recently wrote a post about that. Your own identity. They make people being alienated from themselves, right? So the whole goal is to split the population into as many splinters as possible, and for us to fight amongst ourselves and not seeing who is actually behind all that. So yeah, no, it's a great. I haven't heard about India actually. I do have people on my page from. I keep mentioning that, from New Zealand and English-speaking countries. More interestingly, so people from non-English-speaking countries. Again, the guest we had, Thijs from Holland, from Netherlands, from Europe, but a father from Japan is very active on my page, and people from Bulgaria, from Romania, from Eastern Europe. So, and I think that's a fundamental topic that we need to try to tackle, because it's the worldwide nature of what we are experiencing, in my opinion, clearly points to the fact that it's a pre-designed strategy, just to take down the Western civilization, and apparently not only the Western civilization, the Westernized civilization. And it was all actually predicted or programmed, right, or at least stated openly in the Communist Manifesto, take down the family. I keep mentioning that, but I was born in the Soviet Union, and the Soviet ideology, the Bolshevik ideology, targeted precisely the same goals. One of the famous revolutionaries, Alexander Kollontai, is on the record for saying that children don't belong to the mother; they belong to, I'm paraphrasing, to society. So, and we are seeing that actually now worldwide. So I'm curious, again, because you mentioned the truckers' protest, right, in Canada. Before this whole thing unfolded and woke up a lot of just large segments of the population across the world, Canada was considered a calm, peaceful, free country, right? I had relatives in Canada, and that's it was again, I'm an immigrant, right? But it was a very desirable destination for people all over the world. And when this whole insanity started, we should be careful, because we only met you and I. We only got one video censored by YouTube, not by Facebook, but by YouTube, for mentioning what. So, but when what started, Canada became one of the most despotic masses of land. So maybe, given the fact that it's a long-winded way, to get to the point, But you are active, right? And I'm curious to hear your opinion on the difference between Facebook and Twitter. But do you feel that there's awakening among parents to the communist reality, the ideological basis for what is going on in the courts?
Yeah, I think it's like you allude to, it's kind of happening as a worldwide thing. Over the last couple of years, the sort of assertion of the state over control of the kids with surgeries, changing sex, on a bunch of things. And just in the last week, we've had parliamentarians from the government side strongly asserting that the parents don't have rights. They have responsibilities, and the government has the rights over the child. They have control over the child. So that kind of, and like you alluded to with Canada, Canada has been a very trusting society. We didn't come from the same revolutionary and protest background that the States did. We came from much more of a British colony kind of situation. And so the people that came here found a better life, and they didn't have that protest that they had. So they were very trusting people. We tend to say "I'm sorry" as our initial statement, and I think the judiciary just saw that opportunity, and they went, well, we're just going to be able to do what we want because Canadians don't have a backbone. They don't have much of a protest education, and they've really not shown a lot of backbone in the past. And we're going to be able to do what we want. And that changed pretty dramatically over the COVID situation. And there's a battle going on in between the federal government and the provinces right now, with Alberta basically being the most conservative and standing up for family values in the whole country. And they're also the oil producing province, and they also produce most of the revenue for the government, but they have to share it with the rest of the country. So the federal government is really pushing hard against one province or maybe two. I mean, you got this, and that's how our powers are divided constitutionally, is between the federal and the provincial governments, and they're supposed to check each other's power a bit. But we've got a bit of battle on the parental rights going on between the provinces and the federalists right now.
Matthew?
Wow. One thing also, if I could say too, the idea about the pre-design, I think Roman had mentioned that about this all being designed. And, one of I think the strongest evidence of that is what we were talking about earlier, this backlash that's happening where traditionally the men were getting the short end of the stick in family court. But I think there's a conscious effort among the judiciary to target, if you will, the females. And now the females are getting the short end of the stick and they're belly aching. And you see cases against females that they used to the same kind of stunt type activity they would pull against men. And to me, I think that shows premeditation, and deliberation, if you will. They're thinking about this. It is designed and orchestrated. And the current trend, I believe, is to try to hide the sexist roots of family court by, doing a two wrongs will make a right. They think if they now give the women a hard time, it'll somehow level the playing field. But that just shows how insane it is. I just wanted to say that. So that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, no, thank you, Matthew. And I think I was, for a long time, I was thinking about, methods of reform and ideas to solve these problems. And one thought was, as COVID went through and we started doing these hearings remotely, I thought, maybe if the evidence was presented without sex involved, that would take out the bias that is potentially there from male or females, and remove that. Whether or not that's a good thing or a bad thing, I'm not sure. But that was one idea that I had. The reality is that the legislation is written by lawyers in Parliament and family lawyers and stuff like that. So they present it to the legislator, The lawyers and the legislator enact it, and the judges are judging it. So you've got the separation of powers broken up. The same law is being judged, enacted, and created by the same body of men, and that's a recipe for tyranny. And
Yeah.
so there's the other way to look at it is there a way to get out of this whole system of exchange in the male and female after the child is, you got custody? Is there a reason to keep doing this child support system the way that it is, or is it just a tool of oppression? And can we get away with it
Oppression.
instead of having that? Yeah.
Mhm. Quick question, if I may. So you're probably familiar with the Title 4D scheme that is behind the scenes, actually, more and more at the forefront in the U.S., where federal government incentivizes the child support payments because an equal amount, dollar for dollar, maybe less, maybe more, it depends on the type of activity and type of state, goes straight to the state budget, and then the state can do whatever it wants with it, pay salaries, buy fancy cars for the bureaucrats, and it's actually billions of dollars, and it's very hard to get the exact numbers. I tried. I need to make more posts about that. But in the state of New York, it's a huge part of the budget. It's literally huge to the extent of billions of dollars that the state is receiving. So they have a financial incentive to always have one parent who is custodial and another one who is a visitor, right? And that it create the kind of electric flow from plus to minus, and then the federal government matches that. Is there anything like that in Canada, to your knowledge?
I don't think there's the same system where they're using it. I've heard allegations that have said that. I haven't really found evidence to support it. The child support agency that I deal with, when they give their annual report, their report is based on how much revenue they collect, is the basis that they feel is success or failure, which I don't think is really the accurate measure of whether the system is working or not. Is how much money is being collected. That's pretty much open to abuse. But I was thinking, if you want to stop fighting between parents, eliminate child custody or child support, and you might get that. Sorry, I've got this phone ringing. I'll try to get that off there. Sorry about that, guys. Yeah, so the amount of money that is end up spent on by parents fighting these court things is an incredible amount of money. And if you just took that money away, and you funneled that in through taxation or something like that, and paid amount to a mother or a father that needed support, then maybe you would get rid of this fighting between men and women, and we would have
the whole
peace,
point
order,
is to fight.
government.
The whole point is to fight. They are not interested in getting rid of this system.
I know.
And there's no political will, of course. So you're actually maybe the scheme is different, but what you're saying it supports the assertion, right, or the presupposition that the players, the immediate players in the system, the higher levels are much more sophisticated, but the immediate players in the system are motivated by money, and that's exactly the same thing in the United States, in Israel, in Europe, everywhere. Money corrupts, and they use it, right? So if you're measuring success of an agency by the amount of money it collects, or extorts, right, or retrieves, however you want to put it, then they will be motivated to get more of it. Absolutely right. So
and it's a continual thing. Basically, you could be, if your income varies, you could be back in court every year disputing your income, especially if you're in a business. you either choose to pay the income that's declared and just deal with it, maybe sending you into bankruptcy or whatever, or you choose to fight it, and you fight it, and you find that the costs are actually more than paying it, and so you're in this kind of you're screwed if you do and you're screwed if you don't situation. And the bottom line is the child loses because the child doesn't have access to the resources because the parents are fighting. So they don't have access to the parent because they're all caught up in it. And they don't have access to the funds because the parents are all spending it on lawyers. And their all energy is going to this fight. And it's just devastating. And we're all caught up in, oh, is this parent right? Or is this parent right? Or is this wrong? Or this wrong? The problem is the system is wrong, and we need to have a system of fundamental reform and a rethink. But you're correct, is that nobody wants to do that because there's too much money involved.
Yeah, and
That has
basically,
to be, and well, not to interrupt you. That's, I think the money thing is, again, not to interrupt, but the whole, we're talking about, is it incentivized in Canada? I understand that there are incentivizations to do the child support, just like in New Zealand and Australia and South Africa. They want to get the child support money, and I think that also explains. I think you'd mentioned about enforcement earlier, that they don't enforce orders that they issue. I hear that one all the time. And that to me leads me to believe that they're incentivized because their only goal is to create the non custodial parent. And once they've done that, it's like mission accomplished. So anything else about enforcing orders or modifying orders or having a hearing 6 months, 6 years down the road, everything else takes a back seat to the creation of the non-custodial parent. And I've said it all the time. It's like these family courts have become industrialized factories. But instead of putting out ball bearings, they're turning out, non-custodial parents. Like it's a ball bearing factory, just churning them out all day long. And that has to change, I think. But again, this is my 2 cents here on that issue.
Yeah, thank you, Matthew. I think you're totally right. And now we've got a generation or two that actually grew up under that regime where they might have been brought up by a single mother. My next door neighbor is a mother with 2 kids that's split up, and she grew up with a mother with no father, and her story is, I never saw my father and I never saw a husband and wife interacting. And so then when I got into a relationship, she's saying, I didn't know how to deal with conflict because her mom just did what she wanted to do. And she was like, well, it's easier if I just do what I want to do. And they just don't have the skills and they haven't had the experience seeing a positive relationship. It's sad, and we're going to see more and more of it. And the children are going to suffer.
That is exactly as designed. The system is working as designed. That's one of my personal pet peeves, right? When people say, "Oh, the system is broken," it's not broken. It works perfectly, and we see it works. Yeah, across country lines.
It's a lot of propaganda. It's a lot of propaganda.
It's all propaganda. It's all propaganda, and sheer lust for power. Yeah. I want to acknowledge the audience. I have a glitch here that doesn't allow me to pull comments, but we're being watched. So thanks everyone for joining. Justice J very loyally follows every stream, so that's great. That situation. Mike now is watching. Brad is watching. Let's see, Betty, and there's an active discussion in the comments here. But since we have you still, I wanna ask one question that I'm trying to resolve on my end here in New York. So I don't know what the official numbers for the population of Canada, but how many people are active like you in your experience? Because in my estimate in New York, people who are vocal, who are not afraid to speak out, who establish websites like you do, who have a presence on social media, I would say generously, we probably have around 100 people, which is inconceivable to me for a nation of 350 million right? That's the population. Or for comparison, in New York is reported as a state of about 19 million people. But I would say I probably know by now all personally all those who are active in exposing this as criminality and unconstitutional depravity in family courts in New York. And maybe they're 10, if I'm generous, against 20. So how does it look in Canada? Do you have, would say, large segment, or what's your
Yeah,
impression?
yeah, yeah, Roman, it's probably pretty similar. I come across, I do get contacted from people from time to time, and I get people from Nova Scotia, from the East Coast, Ontario, and people try to go through the official procedures, and then they get beaten down by the official procedures, and then they come looking for answers, and they go public like you did, and then you can see those historical kind of things happen, and then once they solve their problem, or they get dismissed enough times, they get beaten down and they give up, which is kind of what the system wants them to do, is to give up. And then the websites disappear and get lost in the wilderness, and we're back to square one again. But yeah, there's probably maybe 20 across Canada of family law activists that are very strong. There's this parental, what is it? Not falseaccusations.org, and they're quite motivated right now, and they're trying to set up a worldwide family law protest and start. I think it's April 24th is their deadline. So you can check out falseallegations.org if you want to check out what they're doing, and check out my website, Fundamental Justice. I've got all my court hearings in there, my argument, and trying to set up reform ideas. And if anyone wants to contribute, I'm happy to hear and listen and communicate. And try to create some solutions to this ongoing problem that's not in the best interests of our children.
What's the best idea that you have? We have this tremendous inertia when even those who are violated by the court, children are taken away, rights are completely destroyed, right? Complete disparity between what we are taught court is and once you face it, and still people, basically I'm not blaming anyone, right? It's a process, but people are intimidated or timid or scared to even go public, show their faces, show their names, and you can do that. It's still, we're still living largely in the Western world, right? So where freedom of speech still means something, less and less every day, but it does. What's your experience? Like how this can change, because we're powerless against the government. We only need to work, with the people and expose it. Were you able to motivate to see people joining you?
I've got a bunch of people on Twitter. I'm probably 3,000 people on Twitter right now following. And I went into this with the idea that I was going to document everything and just put it out there for public, knowing that I basically had the full house, or a royal flush, right? Because I had lawyers not complying with court orders and falsifying court orders about trust account statements, and I had a judge refusing to accept the transcript, the best evidence you can have. So you can't get better than that. And the Judicial Council said that they have that power, which is a claim of absolute power. And so I knew that I had the best evidence. And so it's like, well, if this doesn't do it, what does? And I went in trying to get public support. And everybody, of course, goes, oh my God, that sounds like Russia or China. And this is terrible, and want to change it. But when it comes down to change, I followed through on the Judges Act as it went through Parliament here in Canada last year. And the last time that the government went to the public to ask for comments as they were debating this act was 2016. And then I went through the court system. They were completely uninterested in my opinion, completely uninterested. It's irrelevant what you think, basically, is what they're saying. And they're not interested. So we do have to create, and I think my idea, is you've got to create transparency and accountability. before people will trust, you've got to create those. So everything has to go towards that, and then creating communication so that we can debate these things and go, well, what is in the best interest of our children? What can we do? Should we still be fighting these things out in a courtroom? Or is there alternative ways of dealing with this? Or should we eliminate child support and make that into a government tax and refund system? There's definitely options available that haven't been talked about, and I think we're at a spot where we should talk about it.
Mhm. What's the difference between Twitter and other platforms you're on? It seems like you like Twitter more. What's your experience? Can you share with those who are becoming vocal, joining us on social media?
Oh, what's the difference between winter?
Yeah, like in terms of your activism, I'm not asking technological questions, right? We're pretty, I also have a Twitter account, but I'm much more active on Facebook. I do like Facebook. It allows the diversity of posts and videos and podcasts, and I have not seen, so far. Thank God, and whoever runs this entity, censorship on family court issues, it doesn't seem that they care for now, and it probably even serves their agenda, right? Because the whole globalist goal is to undermine trust in governments, and courts are primary, like black backbone of government, right? So they don't mind us telling the truth about the courts. So I do like Facebook. That's why my activity is primarily here, even though I back it up on YouTube and on Instagram. But you're primarily on Twitter, so that's my question. Why do you like
Oh,
Twitter
I
more?
see. Gotcha. Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. Facebook I find is very much about other people, and you and personal relationships, and so it's a friend network and stuff like that. Um, Whereas Twitter is more political and legal and that kind of argument. And so I was trying to contact and communicate um, with political leaders in order to initiate debate. And with Twitter, you can post on members of parliament's Twitter feed. And so you're, direct to your member of parliament, which is kind of the people that I wanted to talk to. Because, yes, I wanted to get public support, but I also wanted to get actual support that was going to change the system rather than a lot of complaining.
Mm-hmm. Have you seen some, like success stories that I'm not, of course, nobody experienced major success, but did you get traction there with the politicians or the entities that you were trying to engage with?
Well, yeah, definitely. I have had posts that I've had tweeted or retweeted or whatever you want to call it by senators and politicians. So I know that they hear what I say. And I've had lawyers do the same thing, seeing a response and tweet that response. And then they can also see how much support and what the public says and what the public is communicating about in a direct way. That's kind of what I like about it. So you don't get so much circular complaining sort of commentary. It's quite directed. And then I could follow along with, say, Acts of Parliament and post that kind of stuff and make political commentary on these issues to the decision makers. So, as we talk about democracy and freedom of speech, definitely technology has changed our access to the law, is that the general public can actually research up-to-date stuff that's just being published, for instance, and whereas accessible to all those that political and legal writing that anyone else is. So it's been an amazing democratization of the legal system and politics because we can have access to it. Before, you really had to go to a lawyer in order to get legal advice because you couldn't just find it. You couldn't just do your own research. You had to go to a law library. Now you don't.
Yeah, and that's actually, it's a very good point, because that's why you see the proliferation of cross se litigants, which I think stresses the system. We cannot be controlled, and no offense to Matthew, but lawyers in family law are often, if not always, used to control the client. And I heard stories that they're actually bragging openly about that I have a good client control. So yeah, democratization in that sense that we have access to information about laws, and increasingly so about courts, like what we are doing here, interviewing each other, right? But not democratization in the sense that we have any significant influence. They still, the ruling class still does whatever they want to us and to our children.
Yeah,
that's the fundamental problem.
that's
Yeah, so
certainly the problem.
yeah, Matthew, before I pass it to you, I just want to again, apologize for the technical issue here. I cannot pull the comments, but I see that we are joined by more people. Tony is here. Tony, we probably need to connect and do a show. Marilyn, Kat Brown. I'm just watching in parallel my Facebook app here. So thanks everybody. And later on, these shows actually gather hundreds of views, some of them, and they will stay. That's important, even visually, right? That we have basically every week a person from another state or from another country. I think it sends a very powerful message. We need to do more of that. I don't see a lot of that being done here on the American side, but even your presence, Trevor, it's very important just to emphasize the fact that it's everywhere. It's everywhere. We're dealing with the worldwide agenda. Matthew, Matthew reminds me we keep the shows generally under an hour, so please, the stage is yours.
Oh, well, no, I just want to say, yeah, we want to try to get more of a platform, and we want to get our message. We want to take it global, and one of the things we're supposed to do is keep it under an hour. So that's where that came from. But I just want to say thank you to our guest, and it is truly enlightening and frightening too to see that this goes on all over the English-speaking world. And it's not so much in these countries where I don't know what it is, but I think that in the English-speaking worlds, Canada, America, England, South Africa, New Zealand, Australia, they are certainly, and we see it also now in Denmark, I guess, and some of the other Western European countries. But it's almost like worldwide communism is, knocking at the front door, and the family court is the tip of the spear, if you will, where they want to come in and take control of everything. And first and foremost, they want to raise your children. The government wants to be the parent, and they want to eliminate the parental, role. And I find that frightening. But anyways, that's my sermon, and thank you very much for being with us.
Well, thank you, Matthew. It's been, I've loved the show here in the past, and I appreciate you coming on and supporting the issue of parental alienation and all these other topics that you and Roman talk about. And thanks, Roman, for your advocacy. I've watched you on Facebook, and you send out some really insightful comments, and I'm sure everyone really appreciates having that alternative point of view coming out to counteract some of the propaganda that we receive.
Yes. Excellent. Thank you so much, gentlemen. I think it's a good point to end the stream for now. We can always reconvene. Thank you again, Trevor, for coming all the way from cold Canada and enlightening us on what's going on. Unfortunately, the similarities are striking. But thanks everybody for participating, for joining, and we'll see you next week.
Yeah.
Thank you. Bye for now.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, everyone.